Okay, I think we're recording here. Alright. Sub action. You can see here. This is where his task forces are. I'm not sure where the spread of Japanese air task forces is in this. I know that this one here is an air task force, and they're kind of spread around it. I think he had 3 or 4. This up here is just a surface task force, as far as I know. Here is where my surface task forces are. Here is where I have 2 carrier and 1 escort carrier task force. Mission was set to air combat, reaction 0. The surface task force is here, also reaction 0. There's also 1 escort carrier task force here, which is set to air combat, not CV escort, also set to 0. They're all set to follow a surface combat task force here, supposed to come all the way over here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hexes. So these are only going to move 7 hexes, but everything here is going to move 8. And we can watch my sub die, or I can skip it here. Oops. Alright, here we go. And we got here detection on an escort carry task force from another hex. Here we see at least one of my task forces is cited. 397 popped up a little bit, but you can see that 397 was one of my air combat task forces. It was in that hex that was only 4 hexes away from Guam. They were all set to follow the 1 service task force, so they should all be in that hex, which means they only moved the 4 hexes this turn. 3 for the air combat forces. You can see there they are again. Gonna have a couple of surface combats here, which I'll skip. Just skipping by clicking out of the window once I hit escape. And we got here an attack on one of his task forces. A couple of his cruisers here come up in the later air combats. I can't remember if they're in this hex or not, but you can see that right here my forces are detected. They ended up where they should have, just kind of as I expected. His forces ended up here, which is about where I guessed they would be. But eventually you'll see his task force is going to end up moving 1 hex this way, and mine are going to jump all the way up 4 hexes up to here. There we are with my escort carriers being sighted again. Task Force 16, Carrier Task Force. 127, also Carrier Task Force. 397, Carrier Task Force. 116 is another Carrier Task Force. Oops, sorry, I clicked out of the window there for a second. So you can see that my air combat task forces were detected a lot. We don't need to watch that. So here we go. All of these hexes have Japanese air combat task forces in them. There's one, which actually that one doesn't end up moving. It's his 2 eastern, there they go, they reacted. Now mine are reacting farther. You can see, there they go, reacting multiple times. Because of the ranges, you can see that they're reacting to the one within range 5. It moves, and then it reacts to one within range 5 again, and then it reacts to one within range 4, and then it does it again. And you can see this one of his didn't end up moving. This one here didn't end up moving at all. These ended up moving from this hex down here. This one was up here. This one I think stayed in the same spot. But you can see that my forces here, if I can shift the picture over a little bit, my forces here, they ended up reacting 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes. That's just 1 task force. 3 of them ended up here. And I can tell that because of my cap settings and where they ended up during the subsequent air battles. And you can see there's 4 different hexes with Japanese carrier task forces in them. Lots of stuff happening. You're basically just watching my replay, huh? Skip as many of these as I can. Here we go. There's a strike from him to me, which, okay, we can watch it, but I don't think it's really necessary. But here I'll show you in my this, I believe, ended up being 2 escort carrier task forces and 1 fleet carrier task force. It's going down. Yeah, you can see here I've got a couple of big ones with their planes on cap various settings. There we go. Another strike, and you can see here with the number of planes that participated, this is obviously only one of my task forces. This could have been very bad if all of those strikes had gone against this task force here, set up by itself, which I realize that, you know, there's a chance it would react and the other ones wouldn't. It's just, why did this one end up going 4 hexes instead of just the 1? Also, they ended up, you can see, according to what we know from the manual at least, they shouldn't have reacted from, essentially they were 5 hexes distant. They shouldn't have reacted if what we know from the manual is correct. You can see another task force here. A bunch of other combats that I'll skip as much as I can. I just want to get to after the second air search phase where you can see the other 3 task forces react again. I'm curious, I didn't really check the first time. I'm curious to see if the one task force that's 1 hex away attempts to react and can't because it would end up moving into an, quote, an enemy hex. Here's one of my strikes on him. Ends up going very well for me. And just skip through. I want to get to the next phase. I could skip out of it by clicking onto my taskbar or something and clicking back in, but there we go. So yeah, you can see the battle actually turned out very well for me, but okay, so here we go. There's the heavy cruiser. It must have been part of this one of these air task forces. And this strike happened from literally 1 hex away. Again, you can see this actually turned out pretty well. This strike, I don't know what was going on here, but you know it happens. Probably leader settings, you know, that kind of thing. But again, this actually ends up going pretty well for me also. I think those were the only 2 carriers in that task force, just judging by the number of planes I saw on cap. And here we go, I have a land-based strike against these guys up here. And now I don't think this particular group has launched a strike yet. I think it was this one here that launched the first strike. I forget. Yeah, we actually had a pretty good battle today, but I did notice some fragmentation of my strikes from weather earlier on. My opponent reported his just got screwed up, although I'm not sure it would have made a huge difference, but who knows. Try and skip these. Should be just about done with this first air phase so that we can see the middle inside the second air phase after the search. And there was the light cruiser in that one. A bunch of torpedo attacks against destroyers, which we all love. I actually sink one there. Alright. We'll skip all these. That happens for a little while yet. Okay. Alright, not quite done. Okay, here we go. Second air phase. I don't know where his task force that was right here went. I clearly didn't sink them all, but they're not there anymore. Searches. So the task force I'm going to be looking at, well, both of those there, but reacting. They're trying to react, but they aren't going anywhere because they would move into that hex. Well, actually, that could have been, I suppose that could have been the forces that were here reacting up there. It's possible, because what it does, when it shows you that reaction message, it's showing it to you after it's already moved that task force. So if this, for example, if you were to see the message with this hex selected, it would have meant that they moved into this hex, just because of the way the messages show up. So with this hex selected, I suppose it was probably these ones moving in. I'll have to rewatch this after I finish recording and count how many there are. There were at least 3, which would have been these 3 forces moving up to the northwest. And see, you can see in that one, all my forces are all together, finally. And here we are, I'm launching a strike on his other carrier task force. We'll just get through this. My forces actually got pretty beat up on that particular strike. If his had been in the same hex, I think it could have been a very different day. So yeah, you can see overall, I think this is the last big strike here of the day. Just 2 bomb hits caused that. I must have gotten really lucky on the damage rolls or something. Again, actually went pretty well. This one I didn't realize that the Beauforts used the same torpedoes as the TBFs. You can see the Mark 13. Learned something new. So they launched a strike finally. Ironically, if my escort carriers hadn't been sunk / crippled, I wouldn't have had any planes defending here for that particular strike, although I think it's just a couple destroyers. Out of torpedoes. Okay, so that was that.